I'm Pastor Mark of the Eternals Congregation. The kingdom of Judah, whose capital was Jerusalem, had been a vassal of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar II had replaced the king with a trustee named Zedekiah or Mattaniah. That puppet ruled during 597–586 before the Common Era, until he was arrested and deported to Babylon for having rebelled against the central government. In this scenario, we can deduce some interesting information. In the list of the patriarchs, a group of subjects is involved in the history of Ur, Babylon. The first two, Arpachshad and the lost Canaan, are native of the Arabian Peninsula, and evidently belong to Judea as rulers, whether or not they were in charge. When he was placed on the throne of Judea in 597 before the Common Era, Zedekiah was 21 years old. It seemed an excellent opportunity to have a child in order to consolidate his dynasty. This is exactly the year when the deportation to Babylon began. Zedekiah was in government, and his son Arpachshad reached 11 years old. In 587 before the Common Era, Zedekiah was removed from the government post and deported with his family to Babylon. The son of Arpachshad, Canaan, cited by the Greek version of the book of Genesis, were born in Ur. Maybe he was removed from the Jewish edition because he was born in exile from a dynasty that was no longer on the throne. The Septuagint reports of consanguinity between Canaan, Selah, and Eber. Our chronological analysis confirms the sequence of the succession, but we do not have any documentary evidence to endorse such a statement. During a handful of years, it is not unlikely that the political religious power had found a new balance in a different royal family, perhaps related to the old dynastic bloodline of Judea. The Babylonian stay of nobles and powerful Jews did not force them into prison or limit their rights. They were certainly kept under close scrutiny, but were free to travel around the city and held meetings, did teachings and political consultancy, and in the comforts they had always enjoyed. It is funny to see that the Vulgate, compiled by the Roman theologian Sophronius Eusebius, St. Jerome, then used to develop the text in use at the Roman Catholic Church, is based on the Greek version of Symmachus the Ebionite, which we could call father of the movements of resistance to the religious power takeover of St. Paul of Tarsus. Taking into account all the different traditions, the date of the creations come to be comprised between an extended period, the tradition being as more reliable as it goes back in time. This is the ranking. At number 7, the Septuagint Bible, redated in accordance to Annex calendar system. This is very similar to the rabbinical tradition, highlighting a connection between the two. The year is 3572 before the Common Era. At number 6, the rabbinical tradition, that includes the Jewish calendar. At number 5, the Samaritan Bible. Number 4, the Masoretic Bible. Number 3, the Egyptian myth, astronomically redated by our analysis, that comes to be just in the middle of the Masoretic and Septuagint esteems. Number 2, the Septuagint Bible. And number 1, our esteem based on the Islamic genealogy of Prophet Muhammad. This final source permits to date the creation and the birth of Adam in the year 6456 before the Common Era. From this comes that the Septuagint text is substantially the same level with the manuscript of Qumran, and that both of them come from what we can call the original lost Pentateuch of Yahweh. Before that book, in the Levant area, there were only oral traditions and writings from abroad, that is to say, a different culture that was there around before. An extended culture, maybe with a common language, Aramaic, going back to the surrounding of Babylon. Together with the Second Temple of Jerusalem, the concept of Elohim is introduced as a tacit reference to the priests. A religious text could not be circulated in which the adoration of a late king of Samaria was openly declared, since this would have meant entering into the competition with the divine figure of the emperor during the period of occupation by the Roman Empire. The revolt of year 135, in which also Rabbi Ishmael perished, is therefore the turning point, or Yeldim, of the religious history of Israel. The figure of the king Jehu Yahweh is amplified and mythologized, and the priestly component of the Elohim, the messengers of God, is introduced, linguistically retrieving the solar element of the underlying cult. In the meanwhile, Muslims relied on the scriptures, so as they came from the editors of Jerusalem. The Pentateuch has been heavily politically formulated already in year 332. The Quraysh clan was born later, in year 395, so unintentionally included in its corpus of knowledge even the political falsities coming from Jerusalem. It was only with the coming of the Prophet Muhammad that the religion had tidied up. Clarify the circumstances, it can be noticed that the one God, revered in Arab countries with the name Allah, the same entity worshipped by Noah too, joyfully reconnects with the ancient cult of Isis and the priesthood of Moses. From the scriptures, we can see that Moses' faith was directed to the solar god, and he officiated on volcanoes, and it was used in Egypt, truths one or simulacra like the pyramids. This is the same religion professed by Noah, but not by his brother Ner, the fire of heaven and that of the earth, basically the celebration of the Avestan god Agni. Since in the Semitic documentation the oldest historical trace appears to be that of the tales referred to Noah, we can affirm that Moses was a prophet of the ancient cult in the full exercise of his functions. We strongly reaffirm the Egyptian origin of Moses as a worshipper of fire, both of the sun and volcanoes, as manifestation of God, never detecting traces of an adoration by him of the lunar cult, which is, if anything, typical of the nomadic peoples. All this proves the death of Yahweh is nothing other than idolatry that arose in Jerusalem, which went to pollute the scriptures for strictly political purposes. It is much more interesting to read the book of Genesis, therefore, with the intention of explaining the origin and development of our species, Homo sapiens, and not of the creation, Mother Nature, in general. This is not the smoky attempt to invent stories about the creation of the cosmos, but the search for the origin of man as we know him today. The text, unfortunately falsified and mutilated, does not lead us where we would like to. The Yemeni Ethiopian cults flow along the Nile, beginning to turn into Egyptian cults once they arrive near Abydos. The important function performed by the Nile meant that Egypt became a point of reunion of different cultures, just like Mesopotamia, irrigated by rivers Tigris and Euphrates, was the meeting point of the first major city centers. And false religions introduced false prophets and false messengers. The Cossack Crusades spread between years 1095 and 1492, devastating both the Levant and Europe. When insane violence reached the point to be unsustainable just because there were not enough men to carry them forward, there was a change in tools used to perpetrate violence in a subtle way. So in year 1511, the rise of the first theology faculty in Paris represents a nefarious year for the religious sanity of Europe. If you want to know more, subscribe to the Eternals Congregation channel and stay tuned for news. If you want to investigate the matter further, buy the book Dawn of the Gods, The Untold Timeline of Genesis on Amazon and in bookstores. Read it and discuss of it in your congregation or church. Thank you for listening.